Hello, and welcome back to COCO Gossip, your number one source for the exclusive theories and insider reports the mainstream channels are too afraid to touch. Today, we are diving into a story so audacious, so manipulative, and so utterly jaw-dropping, it redefines the very meaning of family dysfunction on Sister Wives. We're talking about a secret plot, a weaponized legal document, and a desperate power grab that has completely imploded, leaving Robyn and Kody Brown facing a humiliating and expensive defeat. It all starts with a single piece of paper, an official-looking letterhead that reads, Coyote Pass HOA. The letter, addressed to Janelle Brown, details a staggering $5,000 fine for, quote, unapproved temporary structures left on the property for a period exceeding 30 days. We've all seen the drama, we've seen the family fracture, but this was a new level of war. She couldn't force her out with guilt trips. She couldn't force her out with emotional manipulation. So she tried to find her out. This is the untold story of the Coyote Pass HOA ploy, Robyn's ultimate scheme to seize control that has been utterly shredded by a judge, and its ending with her and Kody being forced to pay for the very battle they started. If you are tired of the manipulation and you are ready for the truth, prove it right now by smashing that like button and subscribing to COCO Gossip. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this exclusive breakdown. To truly understand the venom behind this HOA scheme, we have to rewind the clock. We have to go back to the moment the Brown family dream of a united life on Coyote Pass died. For years, the promise of this raw, undeveloped land in Flagstaff was the glue, however fragile, holding the family together. It was the one big happy family mirage Kody sold to his wives, his children, and the viewers. It was the future. But for Robyn, sources close to the family have been telling us for months, Coyote Pass was never about a united family. It was about a final fortress, a kingdom where she would be the undisputed queen with Kody as her king and the other wives, if they chose to stay, as mere ladies-in-waiting in their separate, smaller castles. The land was never a shared dream. It was a strategic acquisition. Each wife had a parcel, yes, but the layout was always a point of contention. Remember the fight over the pond? Kody infamously said, I'm not going to have a wife who's a bitch, who's not treating my other wife kindly. He was referring to Christine's desire for a premium lot, but the subtext was always there. The best lot, the best access, the best view was unofficially, but absolutely, reserved for Robyn. When Christine left, it was a seismic shock to Kody and Robyn's system. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a rebellion. A high-ranking member of the kingdom had abdicated, taking her influence, her income, and her loyalty with her. This sent Robyn into a panic. Her carefully constructed world, where she was the final wife, the legal wife, the favorite wife, was suddenly vulnerable. Then the unthinkable happened. Janelle, the stoic, independent, financially savvy Janelle, began to pull away. She wasn't just leaving Kody emotionally, she was making moves. She bought an RV. She declared her independence. She started spending more time with Christine and her children, forming a powerful new alliance. For Robyn, this was a 5-alarm fire. Janelle wasn't just a sister wife, she was a financial pillar of the family. Her income had propped up the family for decades. More importantly, her name was on the Coyote Pass property. Her plot of land wasn't a gift. It was an asset she had paid for, an investment she had made in a future that was now turning to dust. If Janelle decided to sell her plot to an outsider, the dream of Robyn's private kingdom would be shattered forever. A stranger could build a house right in the middle of their family compound. A stranger wouldn't abide by Kody's bizarre rules. A stranger would be a constant, painful reminder of their failure. This fear, sources say, is what sparked the diabolical plan. It wasn't enough to emotionally pressure Janelle. It wasn't enough for Kody to scream and pout and demand loyalty. They needed a weapon. They needed a tool that felt official, that looked legal, and that could give them the power to control Janelle's land without her consent. It was during one of her infamous late-night research sessions on her computer, a source very close to the situation revealed, that Robyn stumbled upon the concept of a homeowners association. To her, it must have seemed like a gift from the heavens. An HOA wasn't just a set of rules, it was a legal entity, a corporation. It could levy fines, place liens on property, and even, in extreme cases, foreclose on a home. It was the perfect, sterile, legalistic weapon to disguise a deeply personal and vindictive attack. The idea was presented to Kody not as a way to attack Janelle, but as a way to protect their investment. This is the language they use. It's business spoken, designed to mask their true intentions. "Kody," she would have said, "we have to protect the future value of this land. What if Janelle just lets her plot go to waste? What if one of her boys parks a trailer there forever? It'll bring down the value for all of us, for our children, for Sol and Ori." For Kody, a man whose patriarchal authority was crumbling before his very eyes, this was exactly what he needed to hear. It reframed his desire for control as responsible financial planning. He wasn't being a tyrant. He was being a savvy real estate mogul. He wasn't punishing Janelle for her disobedience. He was establishing order to protect the family's legacy. The plan was set in motion with a chilling efficiency. They didn't consult a family lawyer who might ask uncomfortable questions. Instead, they used an online legal service, a cheap and impersonal way to file the necessary paperwork with the state of Arizona. In a matter of days, Coyote Pass Estates LLC was quietly dissolved, and in its place, the Coyote Pass Estates Homeowners Association was born. And who were the founding members of the board, the sole undisputed rulers of this new micronation? Kody Brown was named president and CEO. Robyn Brown was named secretary and treasurer. Let that sink in. They didn't invite Mary, who also owned a plot of land. They certainly didn't invite Janelle. They created a governing body for a community of 4 landowners and appointed themselves as the 2-person dictatorship to rule over all of them. This was their checkmate, or so they thought. The next step was to craft the bylaws, the constitution of their new kingdom, and this, our inside sources confirm, is where the true targeted nature of their plan becomes horrifyingly clear. The bylaws, which were later produced in court, are not your standard HOA boilerplate. They are a weaponized document, with each clause a poisoned arrow aimed directly at Janelle Brown. Let's break down some of the most egregious rules they created in the dark of their million-dollar mansion. Rule number 1, and the most blatant, was a clause titled Restrictions on Temporary Dwellings. It stated, and I am quoting from a leaked portion of the document, "No recreational vehicles, trailers, mobile homes, or other non-permanent structures shall be used as a primary or secondary dwelling on any lot for a period exceeding 30 consecutive days." This was it, the RV clause, the rule designed specifically to legislate Janelle's 5th-wheel trailer right off the property. Janelle had purchased that RV as a symbol of her independence, a way to live on the land she owned while she figured out her next steps. To Kody and Robyn, it was an eyesore, a billboard of defiance parked right in their line of sight. They couldn't stand it, so they made it illegal. But they didn't stop there. Another rule under the section Architectural Control gave the HOA board, that is, Kody and Robyn, absolute and total veto power over any and all building plans. The clause read, "All building plans, specifications, exterior materials, and landscaping designs must be submitted to the Architectural Control Committee for approval prior to the commencement of any construction. The committee reserves the right to deny any application for any reason it deems appropriate to maintain the aesthetic harmony and property values of the community." There was no committee. The committee was Kody and Robyn sitting at their kitchen table. This rule meant that Janelle could spend $50,000 on architectural plans for her dream home, submit them, and Robyn could simply say, "No, I don't like the color of the roof," and that would be the end of it. It was a power they never intended for Janelle to overcome. They intended for her to submit plan after plan, bleeding money on architects and designers, only to be met with rejection after rejection, until she finally gave up in frustration. Then came the fines. The bylaws gave the president and treasurer, Kody and Robyn, the sole authority to levy fines for any violation in any amount they saw fit, without any process for appeal. A weed in your yard, $500. A car parked on the dirt for too long, $1,000. Your RV sitting on your own property? That'll be $5,000, thank you very much. The fines were designed to be crippling. Janelle has always been financially prudent, but nobody can sustain an endless barrage of arbitrary $5,000 fines. The goal was simple and brutal, to financially bleed her out. to rack up so many fines that they could then place a lien on her property, and once the lien was big enough, they could begin foreclosure proceedings. They weren't just trying to kick her RV off the land. They were trying to legally seize her land from her. They wanted to absorb her plot back into the kingdom, to be held in trust for their children, Solomon and Ariella. It was a long-term calculated strategy to erase Janelle from Coyote Pass entirely. The final and perhaps most insulting piece of this tyrannical puzzle was the voting structure. The bylaws stated that each lot was granted one vote. However, any new measures or changes to existing bylaws required a unanimous vote of the board. Since the board was only Kody and Robyn, it meant that nothing could ever be changed without both of them agreeing. Mary could vote against them. Janelle could vote against them. It wouldn't matter. Their two votes were the only ones that counted. They had created a legal framework where they were the permanent, unassailable majority. They were the lawmakers, the police, the judges, and the jury. The trap was set. They had their legal entity, their weaponized bylaws, and their target in sight. All they had to do was wait for Janelle to break one of their newly invented laws. And with her RV parked defiantly on the land, they didn't have to wait long. The first official letter from the Coyote Pass Estates Homeowners Association was drafted on Robyn's computer, printed on expensive-looking stationery to give it an air of legitimacy, and sent via certified mail to Janelle's P.O. box. This was the opening shot in a war Janelle never even knew she was fighting. The letter was cold, formal, and brutal. It cited the new HOA bylaw regarding temporary structures. It declared her in violation, and it slapped her with the first $5,000 fine and demanding payment within 30 days. When Janelle received that letter, her first reaction, a source close to her told us, was pure disbelief. She thought it was a joke. A sick, twisted prank Kody was playing. An HOA on their own family land? It made no sense. She called Kody, expecting him to laugh it off, but he didn't. He was cold, businesslike. "It's the HOA, Janelle," he allegedly told her. "It's for the good of the property. We have to protect our investment. You're in violation. Just pay the fine and move the trailer and we can move on." That's when the disbelief turned to ice-cold fury. This wasn't a joke. This was real. This was a coordinated attack. She realized with dawning horror that they had gone behind her back, behind Mary's back, and legally restructured their shared property into a weapon against her. She knew in that moment that this had Robyn's fingerprints all over it. The passive-aggressive nature, the use of a seemingly impartial system to inflict personal pain, the obsession with control masked as concern. It was Robyn's signature move. Janelle is not a drama queen. She's a pragmatist. She doesn't fly off the handle. She strategizes. She immediately called her sons, Garrison and Gabriel. The two sons Kody has completely alienated. They were, as you can imagine, absolutely livid. They saw it for exactly what it was. A cowardly, backstabbing attempt to bully their mother out of her own property. They encouraged her to fight. "Don't give them a dime, Mom," Garrison reportedly said. "This is garbage and you know it. We need to get a lawyer." And that's exactly what Janelle did. She didn't look for a family therapist. She didn't try to reason with Kody and Robyn. She recognized that they had escalated this conflict to a legal battlefield, and she knew she needed a warrior of her own. She found a real estate attorney in Flagstaff, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who specialized in property disputes. When Janelle laid out the story in his office, presenting the letter and explaining the family dynamic, the lawyer, we are told, was initially speechless. He had seen his fair share of bitter HOA disputes, but this was something else entirely. A 4-lot community where 2 of the owners secretly formed an HOA to find a third owner, who was also the second wife of the HOA president. It was legally audacious and morally bankrupt. The lawyer's first move was to do a corporate search, and there it was in the Arizona state records, the Coyote Pass Estates HOA, incorporated just a few weeks prior. Kody Brown, president, Robyn Brown, treasurer, no other members listed on the board. He then filed a request for the HOA's bylaws and meeting minutes. Kody and Robyn, in their arrogance, likely thought this was just another step in their legal triumph. They sent over the documents, probably feeling powerful and official. They had no idea they were handing Janelle's lawyer the very rope with which he was about to hang them. When the lawyer read the bylaws, he knew he had a slam-dunk case. The targeted nature of the rules, the absolute power vested in Kody and Robyn, the lack of any democratic process. It wasn't just unfair, it screamed bad faith. In legal terms, bad faith is a powerful accusation. It means you're not just wrong, you're intentionally and maliciously using a legal process for a purpose it was never intended for. You're using it to harass, to injure, and to defraud. The lawsuit Janelle filed was a masterpiece. It didn't just ask to have the fine thrown out, it went for the jugular. The suit petitioned the court for two things. First, a declaratory judgment that the Coyote Pass Estates HOA was a sham corporation, an entity created not for the legitimate purpose of managing a community, but as a personal tool of harassment and financial coercion. Second, it asked for the immediate and permanent dissolution of the HOA. And finally, in a move that showed Janelle was done playing nice, it demanded that Kody and Robyn Brown personally bear all legal costs associated with the lawsuit on the grounds that their actions were frivolous and malicious. When Kody and Robyn were served with the lawsuit, the panic began to set in. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Janelle was supposed to get scared. She was supposed to capitulate, pay the fine, move her trailer, and maybe even be so intimidated that she'd offer to sell them her lot for a lowball price. She wasn't supposed to lawyer up. She wasn't supposed to fight back this hard. Their defense, as it emerged in their legal response and through their public-facing narrative, was as predictable as it was pathetic. They wrapped themselves in the flag of protecting property values. In a series of text messages that were later submitted as evidence, Kody argued with Janelle, "We are thinking about the future, about what this property will be worth in 20 years. Your trailer looks like a dump and it's dragging all of us down. The HOA is a standard business practice to ensure uniform development and protect everyone's investment." Robyn, in her deposition, would later cry, actual tears, claiming they were just trying to be responsible. We just want it to be nice," she sobbed. "We have little kids. We want them to have a beautiful legacy, a beautiful place to grow up. We saw what Janelle was doing, just letting her lot sit there with that thing on it, and we got scared. We didn't want the whole place to turn into a trailer park. We were just trying to be good stewards of the land." It was a performance worthy of an award. The victim narrative was in full swing. They weren't bullies. They were benevolent protectors of the family's financial future. They weren't trying to oust Janelle. They were trying to help her see the bigger picture. But their story had a fatal flaw: the facts. Janelle's lawyer was ready. The discovery process was a nightmare for Kody and Robyn. They had to turn over emails, text messages, and financial records. They were forced to sit for depositions, to answer questions under oath. And their stories, under the harsh light of legal scrutiny, began to fall apart. Kody's deposition was, according to a source with knowledge of the proceedings, a train wreck. He was blustery, arrogant, and self-pitying. When asked why Mary, another property owner, was not invited to be on the HOA board, he stammered, "Well, Robyn and I are the ones with the vision for the property. We're the ones who are really invested in making it a high-end development." When asked if he had ever received any actual complaints from neighbors or a county official about Janelle's RV, he had to admit he had not. The only people who had a problem with the RV were him and Robyn. When confronted with the bylaw that gave him and Robyn absolute veto power, he tried to argue it was for efficiency. "We just didn't want to get bogged down in endless committee meetings," he claimed. A laughable statement for a family that has spent over a decade doing nothing but getting bogged down in endless meetings. Robyn's deposition was even more revealing. She tried to play the role of the concerned, innocent wife who just handles the paperwork. "Kody makes the big decisions," she said, batting her eyelashes. "I just do the books. I'm the treasurer. I was just trying to help professionalize the family's assets." But Janelle's lawyer was relentless. He presented her with her own internet search history, subpoenaed from her internet provider, showing searches for terms like how to force a co-owner to sell property, using an HOA to find a neighbor, and legal loopholes in Arizona HOA law. Confronted with the evidence of her own premeditation, she reportedly broke down, not in tears of remorse, but in tears of frustration, crying, "She was ruining it. She was ruining everything we worked for." It was a fatal admission. It was no longer about property values. It was about Janelle ruining Robyn's vision. The mask had slipped, and the ugly personal nature of the vendetta was exposed for all to see. The stage was set for a courtroom showdown that would finally bring this whole sordid affair into the light. The depositions were done, the evidence was gathered, and Janelle Brown, the quiet, steady wife who had been underestimated for decades, was about to have her day in court. She wasn't just fighting a $5,000 fine anymore. She was fighting for her name, for her property, and for her freedom from the tyrannical grip of Kody and Robyn Brown. The day of the court hearing arrived, a day that insiders say Kody and Robyn approached with a breathtaking level of confidence. They saw this as a mere formality. In their minds, they were the ones in the right. They had the paperwork, they had the corporation, they had the law, as they understood it, on their side. They dressed not like people going to a messy family dispute, but like corporate executives attending a board meeting. Kody was in a blazer, looking severe and important. Robyn was in a modest dark dress, her, I'm a serious business mom costume, complete with a folder of documents she clutched like a shield. They believed they were about to witness the legal validation of their authority. They believed the judge would look at Janelle, look at them, and see a simple case of a non-compliant resident versus a responsible homeowners association. They were, in a word, delusional. Janelle, by contrast, arrived with quiet resolve. She wasn't dressed for a performance. She was dressed for a fight she didn't start but was determined to finish. She was flanked by her lawyer, a man who, sources say, was practically vibrating with anticipation. He knew the case he had built was ironclad, he knew the evidence was damning, and he knew that the sheer arrogance of his opponents was about to be their spectacular undoing. The courtroom was small and sterile, a far cry from the dramatic, sweeping landscapes of Coyote Pass. It was a place where feelings didn't matter, only facts. And the facts were entirely on Janelle's side. Kody and Robyn's lawyer, a man hired to defend the indefensible, stood up and began his opening statement. His argument was precisely what you'd expect. He painted a picture of the Browns as forward-thinking investors. They spoke of long-term equity, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and the fiduciary duty of the board to protect the value of the assets. He described the Coyote Pass Estates HOA as a standard, prudent measure taken by property co-owners to ensure orderly and aesthetically pleasing development. He characterized Janelle's RV as a breach of community standards, an unapproved structure that threatened to turn a potentially high-value residential development into a disorganized campground. He argued that the $5,000 fine was a reasonable and legally prescribed penalty for this breach. He made it sound so dry, so official, so boring. He was attempting to bore the judge into submission, to frame this as a simple black-and-white contract dispute. Then it was Janelle's lawyer's turn. He stood up, and the energy in the room shifted. He didn't talk about fiduciary duty. He talked about family. "Your Honor," he began, "the defense would have you believe this is a standard case of an HOA dispute. It is not. What this is a case of domestic warfare by proxy. This is about a husband and his favored wife creating a sham legal entity for the sole purpose of harassing, punishing, and attempting to financially ruin his second wife." A murmur went through the small gallery. He held up a copy of the HOA bylaws. "This document," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "is not a constitution for a community. It is a manifesto of a dictatorship. It grants the two and only two board members, Mr. Kody Brown and Ms. Robyn Brown, absolute, unchecked, and unappealable power, the power to dictate, the power to deny, and the power to destroy." He walked the judge through the most outrageous clauses. The RV ban created only after Janelle bought her RV, the absolute veto over building plans, the unlimited power to levy fines. This HOA, he concluded, his voice ringing with conviction, is not a corporation. It is a weapon, and it was aimed directly at my client, Janelle Brown. Today, we are here to ask this court to disarm them. The first witness called was Kody Brown. He swaggered to the stand. Clearly believing this was his stage, he launched into a rambling monologue about his vision for Coyote Pass, his sacrifices for the family, and his disappointment in his wife's lack of loyalty. He portrayed himself as the beleaguered patriarch, just trying to hold everything together. He was the CEO of the family, and this HOA was just a necessary business tool. Then came the cross-examination, and the facade shattered almost immediately. Mr. Brown, Janelle's lawyer began, his tone deceptively calm. You are the president of the Coyote Pass Estates HOA, is that correct? I am, Kody said proudly. And who are the other members of the board of directors? Robyn Brown is the secretary and treasurer. Anyone else, Mr. Brown? No. So, out of the 4 adults who own property at Coyote Pass, yourself, Robyn Brown, Mary Brown, and my client, Janelle Brown, you and Robyn Brown appointed yourselves as the sole 2-person governing body, is that right? Kody shifted in his seat. We took the initiative. Someone had to. Did you hold a formal vote among all property owners to establish this HOA, Mr. Brown? It was a family decision, Kody stammered. Your Honor, the lawyer said, turning to the judge. Let the record show the witness is evading the question. I'll ask again, Mr. Brown. Was there a vote? Did Mary Brown or Janelle Brown vote to approve the creation of this HOA? There was a long, painful silence. No, Kody finally mumbled. The lawyer pressed on. Let's talk about the bylaws, which you and Ms. Robyn Brown drafted. One rule specifically forbids the use of recreational vehicles as dwellings for more than 30 days. Is that correct? Yes, to protect property values. Mr. Brown, can you tell the court the date on which you and Ms. Brown filed the incorporation papers for this HOA? Kody gave the date. And can you tell the court the date on which Janelle Brown purchased her RV? Kody's face went pale as he realized the trap. The date Janelle bought the RV was a full month before the HOA was created. So, to be clear, the lawyer said, driving the point home, my client bought her RV, a decision you openly disapproved of. And then, and only then, did you secretly create a legal entity and write a rule specifically to make her new home illegal. Is that what happened, Mr. Brown? Kody erupted. She was disrespecting the family. She was disrespecting me. It was an eyesore. It was bringing everything down. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Brown, control yourself. Answer the question. Kody, deflated, could only mutter, yes. The lawyer wasn't finished. Mr. Brown, have you ever received a citation from the county for any code violations related to my client's RV? No. Have you ever received a written complaint from any neighboring property owners about the RV? No. Have you commissioned an independent real estate appraisal that demonstrates a measurable negative impact on property values caused by the presence of this RV? No, but it's common sense. So the only people who had a problem with your wife living on her own property were you and your other wife, Robyn, correct? Kody could only glare in response. His property values defense had been exposed as a complete and utter lie. Next up was Robyn. She took the stand and immediately began to cry. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, speaking in a soft, trembling voice about her dreams for a united family and her fears for her children's future. She was just a mom, she explained, who wanted a safe and beautiful place for her kids. The RV, she whispered, was just so unsettling. It didn't feel permanent. It didn't feel like the beautiful, forever home community they had all planned. It was a performance, but the lawyer was not a captive audience. He let her finish her sob story, then he approached with a stack of papers. Ms. Brown, he said gently, I'm so sorry for your distress. You've testified that your only motivation here was to professionalize the property and protect the investment. Yes, she sniffled. That's all we ever wanted. Then can you please explain to the court why, on the evening of May 14th, 2 weeks before you incorporated the HOA, you performed a Google search on your home computer for the phrase, and I quote, how to force a co-owner to sell property in Arizona. The courtroom went silent. Robyn's face froze. The tears stopped instantly. She looked like a cornered animal. I don't recall, she stammered. You don't recall? The lawyer pressed. Perhaps you recall this search from the very next night, May 15th, using an HOA to place a lien on a house. Do you remember that one, Miss Brown? She just stared at him, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Or how about this one, like from May 17th, legal ways to remove a person from co-owned land? Ms. Brown, these don't sound like the searches of a concerned mom trying to protect property values. These sound like the searches of someone who was actively researching how to legally get rid of a co-owner she no longer wanted around. Isn't that the truth? This HOA was never about the RV. It was about getting rid of Janelle. Robyn finally broke. "She was leaving!" she shrieked, the victim mask falling away to reveal pure rage. "She was leaving Kody. She was siding with Christine. She was going to ruin everything. We had to do something to protect our family." She had confessed. In her anger, she had admitted to the entire motive. It wasn't about investments. It was about punishment. It wasn't about bylaws. It was about betrayal. When Janelle took the stand, her testimony was a study in contrast. She was calm, factual, and dignified. She spoke about her decades of financial contribution to the family. She spoke of her love for her children and her desire to build a small home on the land she had paid for. She explained that the RV was a practical, temporary solution to allow her to be on her own property while she saved money and finalized her plans. She described the shock and hurt of receiving the cold, legalistic fine from her own family. "I have been a part of this family for almost 30 years, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. For them to go behind my back and use a legal trick to try and force me out? It wasn't just a business dispute. It felt like the ultimate betrayal." The closing arguments were brief. Kody and Robyn's lawyer feebly tried to reassemble their property values argument, but the damage was done. Robyn's outburst and Kody's admissions had rendered it laughable. Janelle's lawyer, in his closing, simply laid out the timeline of deception. "The evidence is clear, Your Honor. This was a plan, conceived in malice and executed in secret. It is a perversion of corporate law and an abuse of the legal system. We ask the court to see this HOA for what it is, a sham, and to dissolve it, and we ask that the plaintiffs, Mr. and Ms. Brown, be made to pay for this malicious charade they have forced upon my client." The judge did not take long to deliberate. He looked over his notes, his face a mask of judicial neutrality, but his eyes, some say, held a flicker of utter disbelief at what he had heard. He cleared his throat. "I have reviewed the evidence presented and the testimony given," he began, his voice filling the silent courtroom. "The establishment of a homeowners association is a common and legitimate practice for managing shared property. However, for an HOA to be legitimate, it must be formed and operated in good faith." He paused, looking directly at Kody and Robyn. "Good faith is demonstrably and catastrophically absent in this case." He continued, his words landing like hammer blows. "The court finds that the Coyote Pass Estates Homeowners Association was not formed for the legitimate corporate purpose of managing a community. It was, instead, a thinly veiled artifice, a legal cudgel created in bad faith for the express purpose of intimidating and financially pressuring one of its members, Ms. Janelle Brown." He picked up the bylaws, holding them up with 2 fingers as if they were contaminated. The bylaws themselves are evidence of this bad faith. They are not just restrictive, they are punitive and targeted. The creation of a 2-person board with absolute dictatorial power over the other 2 owners is frankly unconscionable. The timing of the HOA's creation and the drafting of its rules, immediately following Ms. Janelle Brown's purchase of a recreational vehicle, leads this court to the inescapable conclusion that this entire entity was a tool of harassment. Kody was staring at the judge, his face turning a deep shade of red. Robyn had begun to sob again, but this time there was no performance. These were the real, panicked tears of someone who is losing everything. "Therefore," the judge declared, "it is the order of this court that the corporate entity known as the Coyote Pass Estates, HOA, is to be immediately and permanently dissolved. All of its bylaws, fines, and actions are rendered null and void." A wave of relief washed over Janelle. She had won. The HOA was dead. But the judge wasn't finished. He had one more thing to say. "Furthermore," he said, his voice hardening, "the court finds that the actions of Mr. Kody Brown and Ms. Robyn Brown in creating this sham entity and levying a baseless fine constituted a frivolous legal maneuver. This court does not take kindly to its processes being used as a weapon in a domestic dispute. Wasting the court's time and forcing a defendant to incur significant expense to fight a malicious action has consequences. He looked directly at Janelle's lawyer. You will submit a full accounting of your client's legal fees and court costs to this court. Then he turned his gaze back to Kody and Robyn, who looked like they had been turned to stone. And it is the order of this court that those fees, every single dollar, be paid in full, not by the family estate, not by a corporate fund, but personally by Mr. Kody Brown and Ms. Robyn Brown. The gavel came down with a deafening crack. It was over. The aftermath was a scene of beautiful chaos. Kody and Robyn practically fled the courtroom, their faces a mixture of fury and utter humiliation. They had walked in as self-styled corporate titans and walked out as petty, defeated bullies, now on the hook for what sources estimate could be tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of dollars in Janelle's legal bills. Where would that money come from? From the equity in their mansion? From Robyn's trinket sales? This wasn't just a legal loss. It was a devastating financial blow, delivered directly to the two people who valued money and control above all else. Janelle, meanwhile, was surrounded by her supporters. She hadn't gloated. She had simply stood tall, a picture of quiet, dignified victory. She had faced the beast and won. She had protected her land, her future, and her independence. This ruling sends shockwaves through the entire Sister Wives universe. It is the ultimate validation for Janelle and Christine. It proves, in a court of law, the very dynamic they fled, a system rigged by Kody and Robyn for their own benefit. It exposes Robyn's manipulation not as a fan theory but as a documented legal strategy. For Mary, this is also a victory. She, too, is now free from the threat of the HOA tyranny. Her property is her own, no longer subject to the whims of Robyn's aesthetic harmony. The power on Coyote Pass has been fundamentally rebalanced. The dream of Robyn's kingdom, with her and Kody as absolute monarchs, is dead and buried in Sanadade, and they have been forced to pay for its funeral. Robyn's ultimate power grab has backfired in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. They tried to become HOA tyrants to control Janelle. They weaponized the law, they lied under oath, and they were caught. Is this the most Karen move in Sister Wives history? I think it might just be. Smash that like button if you are thrilled that Janelle stood up for herself and won this incredible victory. And let us know in the comments below. What do you think Janelle should do with her plot on Coyote Pass now that she's finally free? Thank you for joining us on COCO Gossip, and we'll see you next time with another exclusive report.